Raya Gira Maitreya Uvacha Saprahasya Mahabaho Bhagavan Shabdagocharaha Pratyachasatma Burdevan Prina Ruchiraya Giram Maitreya Uvacha Saprahasya Mahabaho Bhagavan Shabdagocharaha Prajasadatma Bhudevan Parinan Ruchiraya Giram Maitreya Uvacha Saprahasya Mahabaho Bhagavan Shabdagochara Anyone else? Okay. Transliteration. Maitreya Vacha. Maitreya said. Saha. He. Prahasya. Smiling. Mahabaho. O mighty armed Vidura. Bhagavan. The possessor of all opulences. Shabdagocharaha. Who is understood by transcendental sound vibration. Pratyachasta. Replied. Atmabhuhu. Lord Brahma. Devan. The demigods. Prinan. Satisfying. Ruchiraya. With sweet. Gira. Words. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Maitreya said, thus Lord Brahma, who is understood by transcendental vibration, tried to satisfy the demigods, being pleased with their words of prayer. Please repeat after me. Sri Maitreya said, thus Lord Brahma, who is understood by transcendental vibration, tried to satisfy the demigods, being pleased with their words of prayer. Purport. Brahma could understand the misdeeds of Diti, and therefore he smiled at the whole situation. He replied to demigods present here in words they could understand. There's not much purport here. I will just read the next one also. Brahma Vacha Manasa me sutha yushmat purvajha sanakadaya cherur vihayasa lokal lokeshu vigata spruhaha. Lord Brahma said, my four sons, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana and Sanat Kumara, who were born from my mind, are your predecessors. Sometimes they travel throughout the world and spiritual skies without any definite desire. Purport. When we speak of desire, we refer to desire of material sense gratification. Saintly persons like Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana and Sanat Kumara have no material desire, but sometimes they travel all over the universe out of their own accord to preach devotional service. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Shakshur Vimilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shyudapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajadam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditam Scha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimade Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Parshadi Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurati Se Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Tavai vasmi, tavai vasmi, tavai vasmi, tavai vina iti vigya devi tvam naimam charanantikam. Hare Krishna everyone. Hare Krishna. Welcome to Saturday morning Bhagavatam class. Here the chapter, Description of Kingdom of God, which is about to start, the description. So the pretext is Dithi was impregnated by Kashyapa by with two demoniac or atheistic offsprings in her womb. So because of their demoniac nature, even though they weren't even born, because of their atheistic nature, the world was covered with darkness. And the demigods, who are placed in mode of ignorance, they could not tolerate darkness because they couldn't perform any of their ritualistic ceremonies because of darkness. And so they approached Lord Brahma to get some guidance, to ask him what is going on, why is this darkness prevailing this world. And hearing the prayers of the demigods, Lord Brahma here is replying. Brahma is glorified here as one who is understood by transcendental vibration. Krishna is generally also praised as somebody who is understood by transcendental vibration. Uttama Shloka is one of the names of Krishna is Uttama Shloka, that he is glorified or understood by transcendental vibration. So here the demigods pleased Brahma. So being pleased with the demigods, Brahma is trying to replying to their situation. So the key thing to note here is Brahma replied to demigods in the words they could understand. So here Prabhupada in his purport says the words they could understand. So as a speaker, one has to be careful. One should keep in mind the mood or the level of the students. Say, I remember when I was doing my first year of uni, there were two professors. They were very, very qualified, and they're quite famous within that particular topic. And they both had PhDs. Even out of one of them was a very good devotee on top of it as well, and he actually gave me a lot of guidance. But we always threaded when if these two professors were given a topic to discuss, because they were so learned, whatever they say, we just didn't understand. So they were in a whole different, they only spoke the doctorate language, the PhD language. And we students could not understand. A lot of us flunked those subjects when these two teachers taught. Even though they were really nice people and very qualified, knew the subject matter back to front, but they could only converse in a very intellectual platform. And to say the least, we were studying pure mathematics, and them not able to explain in a level which we could understand made our life really difficult. So a good teacher is someone who understands the students and communicates to the level of the students. To the level of the students, in the sense, not necessarily go to the level of the students. For example, if you're preaching to a bunch of alcoholics or smokers, you don't go to their level. You don't become an alcoholic to relate to them or to talk to them, but you speak to their level. So there's a slight difference. You speak to their level, so they can also understand. If you're talking to them and if you're just talking in a very high philosophy or in a very high topic, they may not understand. And if they don't understand, what is the benefit of you speaking? You're just going to deaf ears. So as a teacher, one has to be understand the nature of the students and speak accordingly. And we can see here, Lord Brahma, no understanding the nature of the demigods, speaks accordingly. There are a lot of examples in very Bhagavatam itself. Say when Narada Muni approaches Prachina Barhisat in Canto 3. Prachina Barhisat is a very opulent king, and he was very busy performing ritualistic ceremonies. And he wasn't interested in devotional service. He just wanted to perform ritualistic ceremonies which can elevate him to higher planetary systems. So ritualistic ceremonies are generally performed like different kinds of yagyas, Jyotishtoma, the Panchamaha yagyas. So all these fire sacrifices are performed by materialistic people, so they can achieve wealth in this lifetime, and also when they give up their body, when they die eventually, they can go to heavenly planets and keep enjoying. So that's their motive. So to achieve that, King Prachina Barhisat was very busy performing a lot of ritualistic ceremonies. And during these ritualistic ceremonies, he was sacrificing a lot of innocent animals. So Narada Muni couldn't tolerate a lot of innocent animals being killed for the benefit of this one man becoming rich and enjoying in higher planetary systems. So he approaches Prachina Barhisat. But when he approaches Prachina Barhisat, Narada Muni doesn't immediately start chastising the king. He tactfully explains him or tells a story about Puranjana. He gives a story about Puranjana and gradually instructs him, like inserting a needle into a fruit. You don't smash the fruit. You just gently, he is elevating the consciousness of Prachina Barhisat through the story of Puranjana. How Puranjana was a great king, and he was guarded by all his family and friends. But when the enemy came and took over his fort, there's nothing he can do, and he has to eventually die. So he was just explaining to Prachina Barhisat that all the sacrifices you are doing, that is not going to help when death is going to come, when the enemy of death is going to come and take over the body and kill eventually. So Narada Muni is very tactfully explaining to Prachina Barisat in the level he could understand. He's a king. So he is giving an example of King Puranjana and how Puranjana was an opulent king. So he is speaking his language and gradually elevating him. So one has to understand the nature of the student. Similarly, we can see in Chitraketu's pastime, 6th canto. Chitraketu was very much obsessed of getting a issue to get a son. Being a king, he didn't have an issue. He didn't have a son. If there is no prince, the king hasn't completed his task as a king to give a proper, qualified prince to take over the kingdom. You can rule the kingdom nicely, with all the dharmic rules and regulations. But if there is no prince who is going to take up that legacy and maintain the father's legacy, the purity, the kingdom could go into ruins. So Chitraketu was very much distressed of not having a child. So when Angirasa came to see him, he could see Chitraketu's situation. But he didn't instruct Chitraketu not to be obsessed about getting a son. He didn't tell him, you should just become, give up all this, go to the forest and become a devotee. He didn't say that. Now, he understood if he gives a higher instruction, Chitraketu, because of his attachment to having a son, he's not going to listen. Any instruction given to him is not going to register. So Angirasa says, okay, you want a son, you can have a son. But he says, well, this son is going to give you happiness, at the same time this son is going to give you distress. So he leaves. And when the son dies, the son, for some providence, dies when he was young. We don't want to get into the story here. Angiras comes and he doesn't come by himself because he knows if he goes by himself, since Chitraketu, the king Chitraketu is very much depressed, he might not appreciate any words Angiras is going to say. If he's going to be preached, he's not going to listen. So he brings in Narada Muni. Narada Muni is an expert in devotional service, is an expert in teaching. So he brings in Narada Muni. And Narada Muni instructs Chitraketu. And by listening to Narada Muni, when he is matured, he's not, his detachment to his son, dead son, Narada Muni explains about the impermanence. And, before he instructs, he actually gets the son to come back to life and get the son to instruct about the impermanence in life. So, Narada Muni uses these various techniques to get Chitraketu to understand his predicament and how to get out of his predicament. So, a teacher must be careful in how he handles the situation. Now we are all sitting in the Bhagavatam class. There's a lot of new people here. If you tell the new people, if you don't chant Hare Krishna, you're going to go to hell. They might say, I don't want to come here anymore. So, you talk to them in a nice way. Welcome, take a seat. See the deities, have some prasadam. By the by, you can also start chanting the mantra. Whenever you have some time. So according to gradually, you instruct them so that they can take up devotional service. And when they become matured, when you can see that they are taking prasadam, they're chanting some rounds, then a person can start instructing them. Then they can start giving, no meat eating, no intoxication, no illicit sex, gambling, You have to start wearing tilak, start wearing kantimala, start coming to Mangalarati. So you can start introducing, instructing. Prabhupada, when he was asked, he said the first year in his first year in America was the most easiest part. He quite had he had an easy time in the first year. Because the first year, when he was in US, in New York, none of them, all the people who came to him, none of them were his disciples. They were just well-wishers. They came to support Prabhupada. So Prabhupada didn't need to instruct them, heavy instructions. But after a year, when they started taking initiation from Prabhupada, accepting Prabhupada as a guru, then Prabhupada has to start, put his foot down and start instructing them in a proper way of behaving. So Prabhupada felt that the first year was easy going, so he doesn't need to bother, giving them heavy instructions. But eventually he started upping the standard. So so one can't really quote, "Oh, Prabhupada, first year he didn't give us these instructions, so we can do that now." No, it doesn't work like that. Prabhupada knew that these people are not surrendered or not ready, so he just spoke to them in a level they could, be tolerated. They could stick around. So even Mukunda Maharaj in his autobiography says, "When I met Prabhupada, he was my friend. He befriended me first. I felt like he's my friend." So Prabhupada was speaking to Mukunda Maharaj, speaking to the early visitors as more like in a friendly term, as a well-wisher, as a suhrid, not as a guru. So Mukunda Maharaj remembers. So here we can see, we saw various examples, Prachina Barhisat or Chitraketu, where the guru employs, the right, how the disciple will understand and speaks accordingly. But sometimes there are instances where the guru chastises the disciple. When the guru understands that the disciple needs to be chastised, he chastises. Even in Bhagavad-Gita, many of the acharyas consider the first chapter and the first 11 verses are just an introduction to Bhagavad-Gita, because Krishna is not really giving any instructions. This till the second chapter, 11th verse, Krishna is just conversing with Arjuna as a friend. The language used, the mannerisms used are more, because Krishna and Arjuna, they are peers. They are cousins. So they had a very friendly relationship. For example, Krishna and Yudhishthira's relationship is much more formal, because Yudhishthira is slightly older in age. So the relationship between Yudhishthira Maharaj and Krishna was much more formal. But with Arjuna, they were the same age. They were absolute peers. And since they were peers, the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna in the early verses are much more friendly. To the extent even Krishna says, "Arjuna, don't be a wimp." It's not something, he says, "Don't be a third gender." Klibyam smagama partha. Klibyam in Sanskrit means the third gender. You don't talk to a student like that. Don't be a wimp. Here, there's other words used colloquially, but I don't want to use it in Bhagavatam class, because nowadays those words are considered offensive. But as friends, when they're talking, he said, "Don't be a wimp. Don't be impotent." So it's much more casual talk. Now just get up. Why are you sitting down? Just get up. Uttishta. Get up. So the conversation is jovial, or not in the level of a student being heavy. But as soon as Arjuna surrenders, when Arjuna says, "Shishyasteham sadimam prapannam," two words, Shishya and Prapannam. Shishya is, I'm becoming your disciple. Not only I'm becoming a disciple, I'm also surrendering unto you. Prapannam, I'm fully surrendering unto you. One might say, if he just said Shishya, Krishna might not have instructed him, because he already has a guru, Dronacharya. It's just, I'm becoming one other guru, so what's the big deal? But as soon as he uses the word prapannam, then Krishna starts instructing. Then Krishna starts chastising Arjuna. You're speaking like a very learned man. You're using words of a very learned man, but you just come across like a fool. So Krishna starts instructing, starts becoming heavy from that point onwards, from that verse onwards. So, a guru should understand the nature of the student and then instruct accordingly. If Krishna starts heavying him out before Arjuna is surrendered, Arjuna might say, "What are you talking about? You're my friend. If you want to fight, you can go and fight. I don't care." He might say that as a friend. Because with a friend you can have that casual relationship. I don't want to do it. You can do it if you want to. But no. But as soon as Arjuna surrenders, then Krishna starts speaking, because Krishna can understand that Arjuna is a surrendered soul. He needs help, and any instructions I'm going to give now, he's going to listen and act accordingly. So it's an art of speaking. And especially topics which are discussed, there's Bhagavatam, some verse in Bhagavad-Gita. There are a lot of very, very difficult philosophy is sometimes described. And also some harsh words are used, like in the 5th canto, when Rishabhadev instructs his sons. He's telling, if you're just working 9 to 5 to just maintain a family, that's nothing worse than Saeva Gokaraha. There's nothing better than an ass or a cow. You're just working like a donkey. That's what he's telling. So when heavy verses, heavy language is used in the scriptures, the speaker should be careful not heavying out the listeners. He has to use a bit of humor, something, to break the intensity and explain it according to the level of the student, so the student don't get offended. Most of the people who come here are people who have 9 to 5 jobs. If you start calling them donkey, they may not appreciate it. So you need to use when you're speaking those verses which have very strong instructions, one has to be careful, with a bit of humor, dilute the situation and speak. At the same time, when a very high-level philosophical topic is discussed, one can't just use his understanding, his intellectual ability to intellectualize it. You know what I'm saying? If it is a very high topic, and I'm going to speak that high topic because I understand that high topic in a very high intellectual fashion to broadcast my intellectual superiority, again, purpose is not served, because the people might not understand what he's talking about, what the speaker is talking about. Does that make sense? So when a high level philosophy is discussed, a person should also be careful, to the extent, he makes it easy for the disciple to understand, or speaks in a manner so the disciples can assimilate, understand, and also follow. So these are the techniques used to instruct. Speaking of high philosophies, when Bhakti, one might say Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, our Paramaguru, wrote Brahma Samhita, purports for translations and purports for Brahma Samhita, which is very hard to understand. It's really high intellectual work. It's even a person with a very good, strong handle of English language, hard to understand. But one has to understand, he wrote that book to actually impress the Britishers and the intellectual class of that time. He wanted to write, he didn't want the intellectual class to take his movement as some sahajyas or some people who just running around singing and dancing, not very intellectual. So he didn't want them. That used to be the culture of those times. When they saw devotees, they thought, these people just run around singing and dancing, and they don't know much philosophy. They don't know what they're talking about. So to help, dispel that understanding or that view of the intellectual class, Bhaktisiddhanta wrote this book Brahma Samhita, which is very difficult to understand. The English, if you read that English, you just doesn't make sense. And I've spoken to some of Prabhupada disciples who were born and brought up in Western countries, who had a very good English knowledge, but even for them, that book is very difficult to understand. So Acharya knows how to communicate according to the situation, according to the nature of the students, so that the students get the ultimate benefit. So similarly here, Brahma is speaking to the demigods present there in words that they could understand. Okay, so let's talk about the next verse where Lord Brahma said, "My 4 sons, Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana and Sanat Kumaras, who were born from my mind, are your predecessors." Sometimes they travel throughout the material and spiritual skies without any definite desire. Prabhupada focuses on this word, definite desire, in his purport. Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana and Sanat Kumaras are Brahma's 4 children. They are Manasa Putras, the 4 sons of Brahma, born out of Brahma's mind. We saw that in the third canto, in the same canto, in the early stages, we saw the birth of these 4 children. And these 4 children are invested with 4 kinds of knowledge. They are invested with Sankhya, Yoga, Sankhya, Vairagya and Tapas. These are the 4 knowledges invested on the 4 Kumaras. And these Kumaras wandered around both material and spiritual worlds without any definite desire. So Prabhupada immediately clarifies, when the word definite desire is used, it's not spiritual desire. Here what Brahma is talking about is material desire. It's not spiritual desire. Because the living entity is Ananda Chinmaya, is full of knowledge, bliss, and eternity. Thank you. And they are not desireless. They have Ananda in them. So the Ananda is manifested through desire. One desires to be happy. That's part of the nature of the soul. So the Mayavad philosophers generally want someone to become desireless. The Nirvisheshavad, the Sunyavad, the Buddhists and Mayavadis. Their goal is to become desireless, both spiritual and material. They think the spiritual desires are there only to just get them to the place where they can become desireless, and then they can give up, and then they can stay in a desireless platform. So that's not the real understanding of a jiva. The jiva innately has knowledge, intelligence, eternity, and happiness. So therefore, he naturally has some desires. So Prabhupada clarifies that these 4 sons, they are free from material desires and not spiritual. Even in Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 2, text 55, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, this Sita Dhira verse, what is that? Prajahati yad kaman, Prajahati yad kaman, how does it go? Sarvan Partha, Mana Gataha. So, Krishna instructs Arjuna that one should make oneself free from material sense gratification, desire to enjoy the material senses which are derived from mental concoction. So, what one has to give up is the material desire. Material desire, especially material desires, which comes from mental concoction. What does that mean? We think, with our limited intelligence, we think, if we do that, we'll become happy. We do this activity, that's going to bring us happiness. If we make this money, it's going to bring us happiness. So these are all, something which we kind of concocted. Say you go to a university and you get a degree and you get a job, then you're going to be happy. These are all mental concoction. This is not the real medium, or the real process to achieve real happiness. So we have concocted all this material desires or material activities, and we come to the conclusion that these activities and these results is going to give us happiness. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, one has to become free from material desires. He doesn't say one has to become free from just desires. He says material desires which come from out of mental concoction. So one has to be, it's not, one has to give up material desires, not the spiritual desires. Okay? Because spiritual desires is which drags us or which takes us towards Krishna. There are many examples given by acharyas where devotees have spiritual desires, and through those spiritual desires they actually achieve Krishna. One of the examples given is in Nectar of Devotion, where the Brahmana, this example is given to highlight Manasa Bhakti, devotional service performed in the mind. So there's this Brahmana who has a desire to serve the Lord with nice food preparations. But he was a poor Brahmana. He couldn't fulfill his desire because he doesn't have the means. So he offers the Lord mentally. He cooks sweet rice mentally. And when he touches the sweet rice in the mind, he's imagining, he's using his mind. He touches the sweet rice, he burns his finger in his physical form. So you can see he has a desire, and even though he can't fulfill his desire, he's using his mind to serve the Lord, to fulfill his desire, and the Lord reciprocates. It means the sweet rice is actually hot, it burned his finger, and it means Krishna is accepting it, even though it is happening in mind. So having the spiritual desire is, Krishna reciprocates those desires. Even Tulsi Arti we sing in the morning, Moro e Abhilash, Vilas Kunje Diyovas. Tulsi prayer, it's actually a very rasika song. We don't realize that. It's in a very high platform. Moro e Abhilash, my desire, Abhilash, is to reside, Moroya Vilas Kunja, in various kunjas of Vrindavan, so that I can see the pastimes of the Lord, I can relish the pastimes of the Lord. So when we are singing that, we are expressing our desire to take birth or to be present in Vrindavan and Govardhan, so we can visualize all these pastimes. So there is desire. It's not like, so you can see it's not like it's desireless. There's definitely desire. And there's again the story of Madhavendra Puri. We can see it's a huge description. It's a long description. I'll just speak the one which is relevant to desire. After installing Gopalji in Govardhan, and when Gopal wanted Madhavendra Puri to go and get some sandalwood from Orissa, he wanted some Malai Chandan from Orissa to cool down Gopal's body. Madhavendra Puri, goes to Jagannath Puri. On his way to Jagannath Puri, he stops at Remuna. Remuna is in the border of West Bengal and Odisha, Remuna, where there is a temple of Gopinath. And he could see that the Gopinath is just worshipped in a very opulent, in a very beautiful manner. The deity is just beautifully decorated, he looks beautiful, all the worship carried out is just top class. It's a very high level, worship. All the devotees there are very devotional, and everything they are worshipping to Gopinath is in a very, done in a very refined, nice manner. So again, Madhavendra Puri, he just installed a new deity, and he thought, I want to worship, or the worship of Gopal should be of this standard. So he has this desire that if the deity is so beautifully decorated and worshipped, imagine what kind of prasad bhoga is offered, how top quality bhoga is getting offered. So he had this desire that I want to taste the prasadam offered to this Gopinath, so I can also, knowing the taste, I can also replicate the same flavor to Gopal and Vrindavan. So here Madhavendra Puri has a desire. But again, being a sadhu, he doesn't act on the desire. He doesn't go and ask the pujaris for some mahaprasad or anything. He just humbly, pays his obeisances and leaves. But the Lord understands the desire of Madhavendra Puri. So at night, when the pujaris offer him the sweet rice, the famous sweet rice, it's considered the sweet rice in the temple in Ramuna is out of the world. There's no other sweet rice better than anything anywhere. I had the good fortune of having the sweet rice, so I can vouch for it. Some devotees went and they brought me some when I was living in Mayapur those days. So they brought me some 3 little pots, and I'm going to say I didn't share it with anyone. I just little mud pot. I just ate it all myself, and I'm not at all guilty about it. So, Madhavendra Puri had this desire to taste this, the world famous sweet rice everybody is talking to. But being humble, he couldn't get it. But Krishna, Gopinath, the deity, knew the desire of Madhavendra Puri. So at night when the pujaris offer the sweet rice, the deity steals one of the pots and keeps it hidden under his dress. And when the pujari takes the rest of the sweet rice, goes to sleep, Gopinath comes in the pujari's dream and says, I've stolen one pot of sweet rice for my devotee, Madhavendra Puri. He is chanting in the marketplace, in the empty marketplace, so you can go and give him the sweet rice. So, the pujari was astonished that Gopinath actually stole the sweet rice for his devotee, to satisfy the desire of his devotees. So, having spiritual aspirations, having spiritual desire, Krishna reciprocates. And he gives himself. He goes out of his way. He steals, to satisfy the desire of the devotees. So one should cultivate spiritual desires, which will bring one close to Krishna. So our goal as devotees is not to become desireless. Our goal is to cultivate spiritual desires, and Krishna reciprocates the spiritual desires. So here Sanak Sanat and Sanat Kumaras, when they travel around the world, they are not traveling around the world. They are not sightseeing. We go sightseeing. We go to New Zealand to see, all the Freud's, and all these mountains and all this, Now, they are not tourists going to different part of the world. They are devotees, and they have desire, spiritual desire, to preach or to liberate people from their material condition. So, in that note, is it time? Yeah, I can't see. Yeah, in that note, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, it's mentioned there, so naturally, see, they don't stay in a place. The same thing like Narada Muni, they're little children, they don't stay in a place. They're always moving from one place to another. The right example you gave is Prithu Maharaj. I think it is also mentioned that they're also present when Prachina Barhisat was doing his ritualistic ceremony, so they were also there. So they do travel, and we can see the Jai Vijay pastime, which is going to be explained, where they're traveling and on their way they went to Vaikuntha, the gates of Vaikuntha. So yes. Yes, they do. When they, well, according to their understanding, they are thinking they are, when they instruct, before they met Jaya Vijay, they were Brahmavadis. So, when they saw Jaya and Vijay acting without duality, acting with duality, they get offended. The thing, according to Brahmavadi, everything is one. So what is inside and outside and everything is one, the Lord is one, So when they are up to that stage, they were Brahmavadis. By associating with Jaya and Vijay, having the association of Jaya and Vijay, while they were there, they were able to smell the tulsi leaves. When the Lord came to see what was the commotion on the door, when they could smell the tulsi leaves from the Lord's lotus feet, then they become devotees, or more personal devotees. Till then they were Brahmavadis. So till that time, they were traveling around the world, and they were preaching the knowledge, what they know, the Brahmavad philosophy. And when they chastised, it is not out of anger they chastised and cursed. They were thinking, I have to liberate these two guys who are acting in a dualistic way. How am I going to liberate them? Send them to the material world. They will learn the lesson, because material world is the place of duality, and they will learn the misery of being dual, and they will appreciate the non-dualness, and they will become, non-dual. So their intention was not out of ego or anything. They were thinking they're genuinely helping Jaya and Vijay. But, it's because they're shooting above their understanding, so they end up offending Jaya and Vijay. So to answer your question, they do travel extensively. And they are also, some Stapakacharyas of one of the four sampradayas, the Kumara Sampradaya. I think it is Nimbarkacharya Sampradaya, comes from that. I think I could be wrong. I think it's Nimbarkacharya Sampradaya. Comes through Nimbarkacharya. Yeah, that Sampradaya is started like we have Mahaprabhu or Madhavendra Puri in our line. There was Nimbarkacharya in that line who kind of re-established or regrouped that Sampradaya. That comes from the Kumaras. So they are great devotees. So generally devotees have a desire to preach, because they understand the nature of the living entities and the nature of their suffering in this material world, and they also understand the desire of the Lord. So as they understand the desire of the Lord is to liberate all these living entities, they take up preaching activities. And so to preach means to travel, generally. So you're going to various places, preaching to various living entities. So that's their desire, because it's the desire of the Lord, and it's their desire. So that's how Prabhupada finishes the purport. They travel all over the universe on their own accord to preach devotional service. Okay. If there are many examples, I don't know. I'm sure there are many other examples. Yeah, these are the examples I know. Yes, he is. Yeah. So Madhavendra Puri comes in Madhva Sampradaya, but Brahma Madhva Sampradaya, they don't go into the mellows of the worship of Radha and Krishna. It's much more formal. But Madhavendra Puri is the first one who ventures, even though in the Madhva line, he ventures into the intimate devotional, rasika, loving devotional service of Radha and Krishna. And on his way from Govardhan to Jagannath Puri, he stops at Advaita Acharya's house in Bengal, in Shantipur, because they follow the course of Ganges. They follow Yamuna, then Ganges, and Ganges flows through Shantipur. So that's a route. So he meets Advaita Acharya, and Advaita Acharya accepts Madhavendra Puri as his guru. And similarly, Nityananda Prabhu accepts him as a guru. And Ishvara Puri is a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. And this pastime of Madhavendra Puri, finding Gopal and Gopinath pastimes, Mahaprabhu says, I heard this pastime from my spiritual master Ishvara Puri, who in turn heard it from Madhavendra Puri himself. So he is in our line, and then Krishnadas Kaviraj repeats that pastime in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So he is the guru of Ishvara Puri, yes. And also the Rasikacharya who introduced rasa into the Madhva line, which we come in. I mean, it's more rasa on the level of mellows, the sweet mellows of loving relationship between Radha and Krishna. That wasn't there. It was much more formal. The Madhurya, now there's various rasas. There's Dasya, Vatsalya, Sakya, and Madhurya. And that Madhurya rasa wasn't widely available, or wasn't available till Madhavendra Puri. It was pretty much in Dasya or Vatsalya, or as a friend, as a Sakyam, friendly, or Vatsalya means parental, or as a child, or Dasya as a servant. But only when Madhavendra Puri, only through Madhavendra Puri, the Madhurya rasa was introduced into the sampradaya. And of course, even the current day Madhvas, they don't, the Tattvavadis, they don't go into the Madhurya rasa much. I don't know if they go into at all. Their core focus is Dasya, Vatsalya, and Sakya. So only through Madhavendra Puri, the Madhurya rasa is introduced, which is like a pretext for Mahaprabhu to appear, because Mahaprabhu is coming in that mood of Radharani. So he wants to enjoy the mood of Radharani. So to help facilitate that, Madhavendra Puri introduces that Madhurya rasa. Before that it was very rare, and it was almost not available. it's not a deviation. It's a maturity in I'm sure Madhvas might not agree with the term what I'm using, but it's the ripened fruit of the mango is sweet at certain stages, but when it is absolutely ripened and falls off the tree, you are from Andhra, you know what I'm talking about. So when it fully ripes and the weight of the mango cannot be held by the tree and it falls, that's when it is the most sweeter. Not what you get in the shop. So the rasas taught by Madhavendra Puri is maturity, in the mature rasas. So it's not a deviation per se. It's going above, it's not going, if deviation is when you start, he acknowledges it, he extension of it, maturity. Kirj, yeah. Yeah, that's right, yeah. Sound same way, yeah. Yeah, it's a really big pastime, how Gopal appeared in his dream and how, even before appearing in his dream, how he gave him buttermilk. It's a really nice pastime, but, I'm just focusing on the desire of the devotee, that Madhavendra Puri had the desire to taste the sweet rice. It's not like me desiring to taste the gulab jamun. That's, because I want to have. Here he is desiring, his desire is absolutely spiritual, that he is desiring so that he can replicate. So I was just trying to focus on that desire aspect of the pastime, not the lengthy pastime of. Yes? Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, one should understand the audience. Again, at the same time, we can't just let them be in that state. The Guru aspires the students to rise up, but of course you pick, Generally these topics are discussed in the Bhagavatam class, but look at the Bhagavatam class, there's nobody here. So when the public is, like for example the Sunday program, that is much more, you don't go heavy, you just give a bit more light so that, we don't alienate people. But when people mature, of course, Sunday class and introductory sessions, you don't speak too much philosophy, you encourage people to chant, you encourage people to read, Prabhupada books. Whatever we say, it's not going to make any difference. People